Okay, we should be good now. Can you all hear me? So, sorry, as usual, I'm 5 minutes late, which isn't too bad. Better than half an hour of last time. So, I don't have much to start with, except that my draw for patrons. So, if I look like I've just woken up, it's because I've just woken up. And I have a cup of coffee here, so I'm going to be drinking in the middle because I haven't had coffee yet. So it's probably going to be a bit more of a vague, live stream than usual. But I thought I'd start by drawing a patron for this month's product. For people are going to win, someone's going to win is. It would help if I actually was organised. Is a pair of Meze 11 Neos. Yeah, not very hugely exciting product, but actually these are pretty decent for an inexpensive pair of IEMs. I think they were around. I've actually forgotten what they cost. Around $50, $100, somewhere in between there. That's how long ago I reviewed them, but they're actually pretty decent. And as we know now, the Anthony Meze is a really talented guy. He went from doing OEM, rebranding some OEM headphones, which didn't work out too well, to designing his own, which worked out really well. So that's what this is for. And so I'll just get that out of the way. This is a collection of patrons who have sent me $1 or $2 very kindly, and thank you very much. That's actually been extremely helpful. It costs me at least around, with all the heavy stuff, around $50 a month of electricity just for running all this. I have a little funky gauge downstairs, which is connected to all the power systems, being Japan and everything being modern, and it tells me actually how much power I use. So, without further ado, the winner of this month's pair of IEMs is... This Is Not About a Girl. That's the name of... this, I think my autofocus is on. It should be readable. Is it going to autofocus? Maybe if I hold my hands up. The Sony's sort of really good with autofocus, but I don't know how close it can go in video. There we go. You are nameless winner of... Please send me an email. The winner of a pair of Meze 11 Neo. So I'm going to attach that in there so I don't forget. Actually, that's name is that online handle is certainly not forgettable. Put that in the box so I don't forget. I'll send you a message via Patreon. So, and if you're watching and you'd like to win some of my gear, I actually want to get rid of this stuff. Stuff that I can't keep around for review or use, I actually would like to give away. I don't want to have a cupboard full of stuff in the end, which is just piling up. I've already given away some IEMs to friends. And if you'd like to and you're not already a patron, please consider, sending me $1 a month or something like that. And, it's actually $2 a month if you want to win prizes. And that's extremely helpful as it allows me to make these videos and not have to expend... It covers the costs of them at least. And if in the future get a lot of patrons, I'd like to do go to all the shows that I can and interview people and do stuff on that. And actually, a lot of people in the industry are really fascinating to interview. If I talk to people in the industry, is one of the kind of really big highlights of going to the shows is you get to talk to them about stuff and you hear about stuff that you just never would have known otherwise. Okay, so I had questions from my patrons, so I'm going to answer those first. Sorry, I haven't even looked at the chat. I've just been staring at the screen, and as you can see, I'm still not quite with it in terms of waking up. And it's to show how asleep I am. I still haven't opened Discord and even read it to see if there are more questions. So, really slack of me, isn't it? And now I've lost where all my stuff is on the screen. Here we go. Okay. So, questions from patrons. How far did we go back? Are there any headphones that you've heard? And this is from Kai. Have you ever heard any headphones in the past that you haven't heard with your current setup that you'd want to hear again? Actually, Stax. I'd like to compare all the Stax gear with... the... with my current DAX, actually, with the Hugo 2 and things like that, because the DAX we had back then probably weren't quite as good. The best we had I heard with Stax. I can't remember. I think it was... No, it would have been at a meet. Yeah, honestly, I'd like to go back and all the high-end stuff. Sony R10s for sure. Whether I could borrow a pair of those, I just don't know. I know where pairs exist, but I just don't think I could borrow them. Any other old headphones? Yeah, probably just those, you know, the big famous ones. But it'd be interesting to compare like a pair of Susvaras and the Stax SR009s and stuff like that. Actually, out of the new Stax amp, or one of the big Stax amps. So that's actually on my list of things to do. So hopefully. Next question that's come up. You've heard the new Cavalli Liquid Platinum announcement. That's the monoprice one, I guess. Have you heard the previous Liquid Fire Glass, Gold or Crimson? I've only heard them at meets, except the Liquid Lightning, which I borrowed briefly. They were expensive. Any comparable thoughts to Studio 6 Master 9? I'm interested in that monoprice amp. That's going to be... I mean, the cost of the Cavalli amps was probably a lot in the chassis. Those beautiful chassis would have cost a fortune. And then he would have had to make a profit. But he was sold a bazillion liquid golds that they sold like hotcakes. I think it may have been his meat setup. They were always a little bit too warm for me in the meats. I think it was the DAC he chose. He had some DAC which had a bit of a warm sound, mushy sound, which I didn't like. But I'd like to hear those, would have liked to have heard those amps in my own setups. The last one he did was the Liquid Crimson, I think, I really liked. Let's see where we go. Do you think there's much correlation between DAC measurement and perceived sound quality? Well, that's a difficult one. You can't measure how natural something sounds. But there are some hints, and this I'll probably get more into when we get around to reviewing this. This is delayed because it's been updated again. And I'm thinking, am I going to try and install bits that have been updated in the current model, or am I just going to review it and kind of kludge it? And I want to pass this on to a guy who's owned a lot of Audio GD DACs. DAC is on Headfire. His nickname is DAC Ladder, and he really knows about them. I'd rather he go through and talk about this. Anyway, this I found out now. I realised why the old ladder DACs seem to have a bit of the hand-built resistor ladder DACs sound euphoric is because they have even order harmonic distortion like tube amps do, but I mean probably more, like a lot more, and that makes them sound really wonderful to listen with. And I guess if you reduce that, they don't sound quite so euphoric, but it was an interesting thing all the same. They just sound lovely to listen with. So you can say those measurements actually indicate why. Other measurements, well, I mean, if you have some, you know, there was the Sabre etch and all that kind of thing. That's tricky. I guess, I mean, it would be interesting to make a Sabre DAC with deliberately that problem and then remove that problem and compare measurements. So unless people compare measurements between a DAC with, say, let's say you make a Sabre DAC and then you have switchable clocks inside the DAC. And if you know what the clock is, it's for the frequency timing. Sabre DACs had something weird like an 80 hertz clock. It was really odd. Anyway, if you switch it with a good quality and a bad quality clock, there's obviously an audible difference. And not a good quality, bad quality, good quality and cheaper clock. And then compare the how you feel it sounds, and then compare measurements and see if you can find something. But it could be something like multi-tone measurements you need, or something more complex, not just your regular measurements to indicate it. So yes and no. I think there's probably something you can measure out there which would indicate it, but you'd have to deliberately alter DACs to induce something you don't like about them, for example, and see if you can find how that shows up in measurements. So that would be a project for someone to do, and I don't know why people don't do this stuff. If they do, they probably do it privately. Maybe the manufacturers probably do a lot more measurements than we see, and they don't want to talk about them, obviously, because they don't want people to be able to say this is a crap DAC because it shows X, Y, Z in the measurements. So that's that. And so I mean, you can make a DAC that measures like crap and sounds great. It's the cheaper shit audio multi-bit DACs, but you just lose detail. The next question that was in here regarding the term warm related to headphones, amps, and DACs, I kind of perceive it to be mid-bass hump, no treble spike, and maybe some additional distortion. I see it used a lot related to tubes. are the traits of a warm sound. Well, headphones and warm sounds in something like this are different. Headphone warm is like, yeah, as you said, rolled off treble, kind of more focus on the bass. So more of, instead of flat, you have more of a slant towards the bass, to some degree. I mean, like, if you cut at different frequencies, I mean, the thing to do is engage a 31 band graphic equalizer, or even a 10 band is probably a bit too few, but 31, I have the choice of 10 or 31 on my computer, and listen to some music and play with the different frequencies. You'll learn a lot really fast about how things sound, how you can knock out just regular 20, 100, 125 kind of area, 200, 400, 1 kilohertz, 2 kilohertz, 4 kilohertz, or 3 or 4 kilohertz. And go through some fairly wide bands and knock stuff out, or add it in and see what changes. And that's really fascinating. Actually, I've just got in. I can't do a screenshot really easily. I'd have to set that up. But Sonarworks just sent me their software, which you get a pair of headphones. They have tunings for different headphones, and it makes it like neutral flat. It'll retune them to be. It'll process your music and make it completely neutral flat for the headphones. So it applies a compensation curve, which is the inverse of the dips and peaks of your headphones. And that's really interesting how the effect it has. And I'll talk about that at some point. Maybe a bit if I get asked questions. Sorry I haven't reviewed the chat yet. I'm just going through the Discord stuff, so then I have to catch up on the YouTube chat. Now with gear, warm. Well, that's different. If you get some mid-bass bloom caused by, harmonic distortion in the tubes, then that's going to be perceived as warm. If in a DAC, people with high frequency for hearing that goes up to, say, 18 kilohertz, and you have a minimum phase filter, which is rolled off at the end, so minimum phase kind of goes off faster at the treble, then it sounds a fraction warmer. So I suppose it's a combination of, it's not a frequency response change in electronic components unless the component is damaged, or unless it's an interaction of a non-flat impedance curve of a pair of, say, IEMs versus the gear. So sometimes you'll see measurements online where people will measure a device and then measure how it sounds with headphones plugged in, and they'll measure how that adjusts. So an impedance mismatch will obviously cause some kind of change, and that used to be the case before people understood about having low output impedance on gear. With other gear, it seems to be kinds of distortion, more or less, with things such as tubes. You do have something to show, like the XDSD. I think, and I haven't confirmed this, so again, this is going on video, and I have something I haven't confirmed, which is kind of silly. I think it uses an op-amp related to the old Burr Brown OPA 627, which had a tubey sound, and I don't know specifically what caused that, but there again, it has it's an electronic component which has a particular sound. The other thing you can do is put capacitors in the circuit path, which I think there's another thing, and I don't understand well, called group delay, and that is basically the delays in different frequencies passing through electronic components, so they don't pass through at the same kind of speed. There's maybe a slight delay in different frequencies, and that is perceived to affect how we perceive soundstage and warmth and other things like that. I just Google around for group delay. It's something else you need to research, but it's been talked about. But you do have people who, when they manufacture stuff, say, I've switched from these capacitors to these capacitors because they sounded better, or they sounded more like what I wanted to do. And I guess how that actually affects things requires kind of really tricky measurements to do with time delay of different frequencies and stuff, which I don't know anything about, but I've read only a little bit about. Do you have any thoughts on Bottleheads kits? Have you tried one? No, I haven't. But that'd be a cool thing to DIY. If you have something, I think they were popular with HD600s and HD650s. They were mostly output transformerless, so they required high impedance headphones. So they were popular with that kind of thing. So, but I think getting into DIY is definitely a good thing. What's your favorite piece of kit/gear now? Usually you can see here, Utopias, either through the Studio 6 or directly into the Hugo 2, which is kind of sitting at the back there. It's kind of hard to plug stuff in. It was sitting sideways so I could plug headphones in. I rearranged everything to fit these little amps in here, the Pro Ican and the Soundaware P1. And so actually I like the Soundaware P1. I've been using that a lot directly out of the Hugo 2. That's a very clear sounding amp, so I'm going to review that soon. That's really nice. Everything else sounds kind of sounds, I wouldn't say lively, it just sounds really clear. That's been an unexpected one because Soundaware has kind of not been very good with designing stuff that appeals to the Western markets, but they seem to have pulled an amazing headphone amp out of their reasonably priced headphone amp too. So at the moment, but I like the Cascades a lot. There's a lot of music I rediscovered when you have a lot of bass thump. Suddenly there's a lot of music that really works well with that bass thump, especially if the mids and treble are good too, even if the mids were pushed back. And favorite piece of kit all time, I think if I was to do the one gear thing, and if this was stuff I owned and wasn't all borrowed or whatever, this I own. And I would sell up everything and I wasn't reviewing. I would get a Stax SR009, the T8000 rig, and the Hugo 2, and then save up for a Dave, and then Dave Blue 2. Probably because at the Meet just sounded brilliant. The Mr. Speakers Electrostats I'm keen to check out, and I'll be checking out in a week. Or this weekend, I should say, because in a week is the Tokyo show. Now, what's your favorite kind of pizza? Not liking pizza is not an acceptable answer. This was from Fish Commander. That's brilliant. I like pizza. I'm vegetarian, so usually I eat margarita pizzas, and they're kind of a go-to. When I'm in an Italian restaurant, there's nothing else I can eat. Or at the family restaurants here, they all have margarita pizzas. It's kind of a fallback. Japan is very non-vegetarian friendly. Otherwise, what's the best pizza I've had? Various mixed vegetable pizzas and there have been some fantastic ones from really great pizza places I've had. So I can't say specifically, but anything that's vegetarian with cheese is okay. Although vegan pizzas are preferable. I should be vegan ideally, but being vegan here is like you're really going to suffer, and I don't want to drive my family nuts, so I eat cheese. But my coffee has soy milk in it. So there we go. Okay. Do we have any last questions in here? Blah, 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 blah. Favorite movie soundtracks from... Now I've got to say this name. Monstradamus. Favorite movie tracks? Inception. I thought that was brilliant. I love that movie. That was my recent favorite. I haven't thought about movie... I don't watch a lot of movies. Inception, I love that movie. That was brilliant. I'm kind of in two minds whether it was a brilliant movie, a totally brilliant movie or not. Because it lacked character depth a bit, but it was a brilliant idea. I think it was, it was just, everything but the actual Inception was just a setup just to get to the Inception. So the Inception idea was brilliant. I loved how they did the music. Your experience with Japanese music, mainstream anime soundtracks or underground scene? My experience with Japanese music is fairly limited. When I came here the first time it's exactly 20 years ago now. And I was in a convenience store and I heard, unusually, a pop star singing English. That's automatic. Sorry, I won't sing anymore. That's by Utada Hikaru. Or she went by the stage name of Utada when she was in foreign markets. And she wrote a song called First Love, which was just... beyond number one. It was just like probably the hottest selling song in Japanese history, and nothing has exceeded it. It's just was so huge, and she became she started off when she was 14 or 16 was when she sang her first big hit song, and her family were all music producers, musicians, whatever. She was brilliant, really brilliant singer, and there are captures of her waiting to go on TV and stuff like that, where she's just singing to herself and stuff like that. Truly brilliant. And she had a very turbulent life. She married her manager. She divorced her manager. She married some random Italian bartender. That's not a joke. She divorced that random Italian bartender recently. She got back. She stopped making music. She started making music, as you do. The only thing she hasn't thankfully done is done anything like join the 27 Club, like that poor DJ who died recently. Her mother died, but she's a brilliant singer, and she produced some stuff which was kind of really odd, and some stuff that was amazing. And I was a fan of hers for a while. The other one was Mr. Children. Was a very big band. They're like there are a couple of bands which are like the proverbial In Excess. I suppose Mr. Children is like the In Excess of Japan. In Excess, no, sorry, U2 of Japan, almost. Or In Excess of Japan. Yeah, but nobody died. So it's when you talk about rock, you can only half the thing you talk about is who died, which is terrible. But I mean, half the bands we like, half the old bands we like, somebody died in them. AC/DC, you can't win, can you? And so Mr. Children was like, yeah, they're old rockers now, and I really like their stuff too. There are some other old rocker types in Japan that make really great stuff, but most of them, of course, are not in English, so they won't make any sense. But and I don't listen to so much Japanese music now. A lot of it, I just turn on the radio, it's like, oh, this is some squeaky pop, and just don't care. A lot of it's really become, of course, like who was that band? You know, when you have a band and they're entirely set up purely to they find some people, like kids they can make sing, and then they create a band out of nothing. That's big in Japan. So a lot of the bands here are just generic assembled rubbish, and they have things like AKB48, which they just assembled as many girls as they could into all these bands and stuff like that, and created fan clubs and all that stuff. I hate that, so I just kind of avoid it. Okay, have you ever had Meat Gear impressions change significantly after home use? Oh, absolutely, I have. I had what came here that changed significantly? Some stuff. I'm trying to think. I once took a pair of. I don't have them sitting around, do I? My Meat headphones used to be a pair of Symphones Magnums, which are basically modified Grados with better drivers. And this Ryden's still making these drivers. I should talk about them in a video sometime. I used to take them to meets, and the problem is they're stupidly easy to drive. So then I took them and found this amp. This sounds really good. I want to review a product from this manufacturer. I borrowed the amp, blah, 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 blah. Plugged any other headphones into it, like high, and that sounded like, that sounds really average. I think it was HD800s they sounded average with. Don't worry, I think the product exists now. And I was kind of like, I've got to review this now, and it sounds crap. That was a kind of scary thing about agreeing to review products. There hasn't been a lot that's been bad. Most stuff now, even really cheap stuff, is good. I'm just trying to look around my desk and see if there's anything that I can mention. The scary things, of course, was reviewing the IDSD, because I had no idea how this was going to turn out. I'd never had an IFI product at all. Meat stuff that was different. No, not really significantly, but yeah, there's kind of, you find out, the more longer you have something around, the more you find out what you don't like about it. So that's probably the truth you see of hype trains. Stuff becomes hyped up, and then after a while you suddenly start being like, well, the treble can be a bit grainy sometimes, or this can be bad sometimes. And then, so I try and think of what is, what's going to be discovered after the hype train has died down. So, which is why people, I guess, think my reviews are balanced. I try and think of that. So I try and think of as much as I can. But I don't think I was disappointed by anything. Looking around, it's kind of, no. I wasn't surprised by anything that was better. No, it's mainly stuff that I haven't heard and I'm taking a risk on. It's kind of scary, but... Okay, now I'm going to actually go through and read the chat. And you've already said a mile of stuff and I have no idea. When are you going to do a review on the AudioValve Solaris? When I can borrow some stacks? Well, I was going to borrow some stacks and I haven't got around to it. What killed it was last year I broke my toe. And I was supposed to go to the Tokyo meet and I couldn't go on crutches. You just don't try and go around Tokyo on crutches. It's not a good idea. So the idea was I was going to go and borrow some stacks of gear and then compare it, the Stax gear with plugging stacks into that. I could review it without doing the Stax gear. I know what I'm going to say. But I want to do with the Stax is kind of, the other thing I can't do is I don't have any phono gear because it has a phono stage inside. So that's just been delayed purely by Yeah, this, that, and the other. The lack of stacks. So, next thing is... Okay, now I'm finally getting around to the chat. You like my inside pics of the P1? Ah, yes, that was very handy because I don't like, it's not mine. I don't like pulling stuff apart that's not mine without agreeing to. Your review of the Core Dave on Headfire was significantly different to review and slightly different. Now I'm gonna try the Focal Utopias again with the Dave when I can. I'll see if I can. I'm thinking about taking the Utopias to the meet, and I should be able to just take them into the distributor's room and just plug them in. I don't know why it just sounded. The combination just for some reason it didn't sound bad, but it just sounded like the micro detail was missing for some reason. But with HD800s, there was absolute ridiculous ton of micro detail. I don't know why. Now, there are suspicions, weird suspicions happening to fall on issues with the headphone connectors, with maybe causing some kind of crosstalk. Headphone connectors are not really ideal. They were headphone connectors like your good old 6.3mm go back to, I don't know if it's even a century ago, maybe even that long, that kind of time. They're really, really, really old connectors. There should be sufficient contact that they shouldn't cause any issues, but I don't know. There were people saying that if they used a headphone adapter to use the RCA plugs on, say, Hugo 2, that you get a wider sound stage than if you use the headphone socket, which is like, what? So something really odd was going on there, and I have no idea what. I've got to try it and see why. But sometimes stuff happens and it doesn't seem to make sense, but there actually is a logical reason for it. So I'm going to have to try and find out what's going on. Yeah, my website reviews get updated occasionally with additional info or corrections. So I'm listening to you via JVC FX850 IMs. Kojo Technologies amp. Yeah, there's some interesting stuff floating around Japan. So I should check all that out. There's some JVCs people have been told to check out. And JVC have a lot of talent. So their stuff tends to get a bit underlooked in overseas markets. But I don't think a lot of it is sold in overseas markets. Give me the amp on the top shelf on the left. Audio Valve Solaris. Hi, Tyler. Sorry, I'm only just catching up with chat now, so I'm really slow. There are two R10s on eBay for like $8,000. Yeah, they're always crazy money. They're very risky to buy now. There was a guy who's rebuilding them. I don't remember what. Maybe even it was in Thailand or Hong Kong or somewhere. But there's a huge risk of driver damage from the glue and stuff from the pads, deteriorating and getting onto the drivers. So it's extremely risky now. What's my ethnicity heritage? I'm born in Australia and my parents were English. There we go. And my voice sounds like crap at this time of the morning. What's the point of live? To answer questions. We have random Russian and Japanese. I'm not going to try and read Japanese at this time of the morning. Okay. Just ordered my Focal Utopia. Please know which amp would be better for me. Buy a Hugo 2 if you can afford it. That's the easy answer. Is the use of a valve amplifier recommended for the HD800S? If you want to use a valve amplifier, it's not going to necessarily be warm. There are valve amplifiers out there that sound absolutely dead neutral cold. It's induced. It's some, you can induce a circuit, both solid state and tube, to distort with second order harmonic distortion or whatever to make it sound euphoric. So it's just up to personal preference. So let me see. Oh, Soundaware P1. Actually, yes. Now that'd be interesting to try with HD800S. Actually, I think the big problem with them is still the cable, and I know people don't like me saying that, but it's just a lot of stock cables. I always said tend to be designed for robustness, and I was listening to when I first heard the HD800S, I thought they sounded off at the meet, and I was saying that, and then I realized afterwards it was a cable. And I was thinking, oh god. But anyway, that's in front of Axel Grell too. Good amp for the Z1R. Good question. It's still be interesting to try the Soundaware P1 with that too. It's going to be quite an interesting amp to review. I have a Stax SR007 with a Bifrost multi-bit. There's your answer. It's the Bifrost multi-bit. It depends what music you're listening to too. I mean, I have a lot. I was just going through making a list of music, but I was trying to make it like a good flowing playlist, mostly female vocals, just whatever it comes up to mind. And I realized like a lot of this stuff I listen in the car to Radio Paradise. It's I cache it on my phone and I listen. This has got Velcro on the back at the moment while I've been listening with it. And I think this song is great, so I give it. The Radio Paradise has a rating system from 1 to 10, so I'll give it like a 7 or an 8. A lot of 8 or 9, and occasionally 9. And then I'll get home. I'll get on my. It shows in my profile what rating I've given it, and then I'll cut and paste it straight into Roon or Tidal, which is the same thing. And then I'll listen to it. And it's like, oh my god, this was recorded. It's been compressed. It's you don't hear that in the car. You don't hear the recording issues in the car. And then so I've got a lot of stuff which there's just not enough detail there. So there's a lot of stuff where are they visible? Yes, the LX, where that's good enough to listen to most of the music I listen to, and this doesn't provide any benefit. So when I say difference between Bifrost multi-bit, I don't think is going to be that resolving. So if you can't hear the difference between different stacks with it, well, whether it's your music or the DAC, well, maybe it's not going to hear that much difference. I mean, but tone differences we hear first. Detail differences we hear, only under less common circumstances than people may admit. Someone doesn't like Gustard. Okay. I live in Japan. I don't even like music from Japan. Some of it I do, but it requires more of an effort to understand the lyrics, because a lot of it's kind of very slangy and but I mean, I got into jazz. My hair's turning grey. I'm getting to that stage where jazz is more appealing. So when will Sennheiser produce planers? I was actually thinking of asking Axel Grell that if he's at Tokyo this time. So I don't think they need to. I mean, they're probably very happy with the driver efforts they've made with the HD800. So why would they need to? But it'll be interesting to try the HD820 and see if it's much better. But it's really funny now. When the HD800 came out, $1,500 was a huge deal. Now it seems like it's cheap, which is really funny. Think about it. And with stuff like $6,000 headphones, it seems cheap. Which is better, Chord Hugo 2 or TT? I don't know. The TT was based on the original Chord Hugo, but being that it has a better power supply, it's probably a bit better. That'd be interesting to question. I wonder if a Q-Test plus something like a P Soundaware wouldn't be a better option than a TT. That would be interesting to test, a TT versus a Q-Test plus a good amp for the same money maybe, or less money. I don't think Sony would ever make planers. I mean, they're invested big on their 70mm drivers. So I don't see them planers in their future. I mean, they're not so much. Well, they do try and jump on bandwagons, but the manufacturers have to provide their own unique ideas. Otherwise, they have to be able to have something in the market which they can say, look, we've got the latest, greatest tech. And so it's Sony is their 70mm drivers. Sennheiser has their ring driver. We have Mr. Speaker's review coming in a couple of days. The OpenFlow, the Flow system, and their Nitinol headband and stuff like that. Although that's a small manufacturer, And IFI with their 3D system and bass boost and IEM match. And if you want a textbook case of how to get a lot of fans, IFI is a good example with all their bazillions of features. When can we expect the R2R7 review? Well, I could just review it. Okay, so what happened was I got it. And then as I was going to review it, well, then the Kingworth started talking about firmware differences. So he said, could you try this other firmware? And then there was going to offer two firmwares, the standard firmware and then the accurate firmware, where it provides a more accurate signal to all the components inside. But he thought that what he'd set up at the beginning was good enough. And then what he did is he changed the layout of the inputs. There's actually, it can handle 6 inputs, but what those inputs are, he changed. That wasn't a big deal, the next one. Then what he did is he upgraded the USB to make it isolated, and now he's upgraded the USB to make it isolated with its own power supply. So you have essentially the equivalent of those, you know how you can buy, I sit on the back of my desk so it's plugged in, I won't show it, the Singsa, or however you pronounce it, F1 USB to SPDIF converter, which has been very big. There's also a larger box which does a lot of conversion, but that converter can also output I2S. Now, if you use it set it up with a power supply, then you have your own dedicated, high quality converter, which will probably provide a better input to a DAC than, just using the built-in USB input in many cases. Now, so essentially, Kingworth has built that into the R2R7. He said, well, yeah, you could build it in yourself. You just have to open up the box, take out the divider, and then drill holes in it, and then wire this in here, and then add these components and all this stuff. And I'm thinking, do I really want to do that? I have replaced one of the older DACs I had from Audio GD. I replaced one of the main boards in that, and that was 4 hours of hell. And I'm not sure I'm up for a couple of hours sitting there carefully taking apart one of these things again, just to test the USB. So. Do I want to? I think I'd rather send it on, but if it's isolated USB and has its own power supply, it's going to be essentially the same as the setup I have when I use I have an IFI iUSB 3 down here, and that will, it's going to be essentially the same. I'm not going to be nitpicking, which does, notes on the piano sound a tiny bit better kind of nitpicking if I do it. So if I reviewed it now, I think I essentially get the same result. So I could think you just review it now, because essentially it's not going to change. The other thing I don't have now is because Shit Audio upgraded the Yggdrasil. I haven't upgraded mine, so I can only compare to the older Yggdrasil, which is kind of sucks in a way. But I don't think it's an invalid comparison. So it just got kind of delayed because I have to unplug everything, pull it out, talk about the inputs, or use the photos or something like that. How I'm going to go about it, I've been thinking about in the last few days. So I'd actually wanted to get that done before April, but that didn't end up happening. So, Shangri-La Junior versus Mr. Speaker's Voce. That sounds like a fun idea. And I'll get the stacks in too. That'll be fantastic. It'll be the most expensive review I ever did. AKG K1000s. Yes, there's a successor to it, and I want to review that too. The K1000 can sound really brilliant. It does sound like speakers. Even out of them, moderately inexpensive. Someone way back, we had a meet. Way back when the Tokyo shows were on, we were actually allowed to use a room in the show, a really, really tiny room the size of about 2 or 3 toilet cubicle. It was a tiny, tiny room and didn't even have air conditioning. And everyone brought their gear, and we piled up like 20, 30 grand worth of gear across the table, this tiny table, and it got so hot in there, someone had to stand on the door and pump the door open and closed to get the hot air out. I'm not joking about this. We bring manufacturers up there and they bring their prototypes of stuff, and they go, God, it's hot in here. And we're standing there pumping the door. Yeah, this is the old venue. We can't do that now. But we used to do that, and it was complete madness. It was. I've got photos which are just mind-blowing. We had, everything. Someone did bring AKG K1000s all the way from the US and an amp to power them with. It was just some small Class A, B amp or something. I don't remember what it was. Some small, tiny thing. And that was good enough. And with all the digital gear we had there, it sounded really fantastic. So, but they've got a successor called MySphere. Sphere is in sphere. MY and Sphere. It's I've got their email. I've been sitting there and going. I'm on the newsletter, and I'm thinking I want to review their gear, so I should contact them. I already talked to the guy who the ex-AKG guy who made them way back on Headfly when I was moderating. When I saw him appear, I talked to him. So I should get those in. That'd be really cool. Another of those things I'd really like to do. So if you had to settle with headphones under 1,000, which pair would it be? At the moment, I don't need portability. But at the moment, I'm sitting on this, the Eon Flow Open. I like the Ether Flow, so these kind of, they're easy enough to drive. I've got some nice gear, they work well with stuff like this. Probably, at the moment, these. Or the Cascades. So it'd be a toss-up depending on, if most of the music I listen to, I could get away with listening on the Cascades. And if I was to sacrifice, some of the bass thumping music, I'd probably go for Eon Flow Open. So it's a toss-up between those two. It'd be a hard decision. Okay. Have you heard the Marantz HD DAC 1? Yes, I think it's the one I think. Yes, a friend has one still. Yes, I did. I had it in here for a DAC comparison 5 years ago, a long time. It was posted on forums. I'd like to get it in again because if you plugged in, say, a regular optical connection, it sounded like crap. Back then, the old ladder DACs, they were super sensitive to transport. You had to have a good comparable CD player to plug into them, or they sounded like crap. So they were very good with good quality converters. So it'd be interesting that I have good SPDIF converters now to bring it in and review it. And in the back of my mind, I've had it in mind to go and ask my friend, do you still have it? And can I review it just for fun? So it'd be interesting to compare now to something like the R2R7. But I think those old DACs have been fairly made redundant by things like that. I mean, if you want that kind of sound, there you can buy it now new. And it does high res. So, which is I had a Parasound DAC 1600 and I thought it was the nicest sounding DAC I owned, but pre-Tidal I thought, but I'm getting all this high res music. Nah, it's got to go. And actually the guy who contacted me from SonarWorks is the guy who bought it years and years and years ago from me. And there was some way you could probably upgrade it to do high res, but it had all this electronic componentry in there to do all this other stuff. What was it? It had some feature. It had all this stuff to invert polarity and all that, and it ran through all these logic chips and stuff, and you have to have bypassed all of those. And I looked at the circuit diagram and I thought, no, definitely not. If you could have taken the DAC modules and somehow bypassed all the logic stuff entirely and built in something, say from Twisted Pair Audio or whatever, to supply the digital signal to them. If you're pretty hardcore, that would have worked. But I guess it's what the guy tried to do afterwards. But no, in the end, I just said no, way too hard for me. Focal Utopia, they don't have bass. Depends what you call don't have bass. They're flatter. So if you have music that's recorded without a lot of bass, now this is the thing. Yeah, music has bass or doesn't have bass. If you like your bass, you buy something like Campfire Audio's Cascades. If you have to ask about bass and you listen to the music with thumping bass, then you're not buying any. Go and buy Utopias. Utopias are what you do. What I listen to when I want to listen to well recorded stereo. Good stereo recording, jazz recording, for example, or classical, where you can hear the depth. That's what you get. You get a lot of depth. So you can hear if there's an instrument like there, or there's another instrument further back, you can hear very clearly the difference in depth. That you need, of course, good digital gear too. So that plus the Hugo 2, you can hear very clearly where all the instruments are, both left to right and forward to back. And that I just haven't heard on anything else. If you're caring about bass, no. For a lot of stuff, I just grab the Cascades or whatever. There's a lot of stuff is just recorded and compressed, and they don't expect people to use Utopias with them. So it's kind of the higher you go with these kinds of things, the more you limit yourself in some respects, because you start to notice stuff that unlikable stuff like distortion. Yeah, sometimes, an interesting comment about decided buying something without even hearing it. I mean, if I had millions of dollars, of course I'd be going out and buying tons and tons and tons of stuff and try and go, I like that or whatever, and have a cupboard full of headphones. Some people just get to do that. There's a kid on HeadFi who was from Hong Kong and obviously had a very, very, very rich family. And he posts shots of him with some beautiful girl and this in Hong Kong in a backyard pool and this huge like villa-like place. Who has that in Hong Kong unless they're massively loaded? And he just buy the top of the line absolutely everything every single time and flaunt it and drove everyone completely nuts. So, is it worth buying an Oppo headphone now they discontinued production? They're still going to warrant them. So, I mean, if you particularly want. Interesting thing I'd like to try, there's a guy modifying the PM1 to sound apparently even more fantastic than it originally sounded. I don't remember who it was. That'd be interesting to check out. That guy's going to, if he's still modifying the headphones, is going to be frantically running out to buy a lot from Oppo, maybe. They were very warm. They were very good sounding headphone, very warm though. It's kind of sad that they're abandoning production. I kind of wonder if they actually made the whole headphone assembly themselves, or if they had another manufacturer make it, because the headphone assembly itself was really, really nice. It'd be interesting to see if you get, if it wasn't Oppo directly, some other manufacturer might be interested in making some headphones with them with different drivers. That would be interesting. You haven't listened to Utopias yet. Try the Clears. For most stuff, and everyone's been asking me to review the Clear. Yes, I want to borrow a pair and review them. I'll try and do that. I'd probably, taking a guess, if they're a bit more resolving than the LX, which is sitting just over my shoulder, then they're going to be pretty good. They're kind of the good general all-rounders. And the LX are nice because they tend to sound wider. The Utopias sound narrower, but again, the Utopias work really nicely when I want to hear depth. And regular stuff like the LX is really good for most of the music I listen with. Eon open or Eon closed? You'll see in the review. The open sounds, the closed, it has more bass. The open has more bass. So it's the same thing which we had with the brain's not going to work. Mr. Speaker's Ether, Flow open and closed, and the Ether open and closed. The closed loses some bass, so you get a bit more mid bass in the open, and it sounds a little bit wider. So I think the closed sounds really closed. If you compare this, the closed version sounds really closed. The closed is sitting here, just out of view. There we go. So that sounds most closed, bit more open. Ironically, no. And then the big ones, which are sitting, you can just see there. Where are we? Here. Sound even wider. But you'll see the review, I think, a couple of days, depending on when I can shoot it. It would have been today. Oh, maybe I can do it today. We'll try. I think I have time today. I have to prepare other stuff for work, but I think I have time today. If you like all types of music, they're generally, I consider like the Mr. Speakers a safe buy, because they're generally I call listening neutral. They're slightly warm of neutral, which is what I call listening neutral. Buy from Japanese brands when you live in Japan. Depends. No, I just buy, okay. Sony stuff is made in China. Very little stuff is made in Japan, if at all. I mean, it's the same with cameras. If you buy a Nikon, then the high-end models are made in Japan, but the low-end stuff is made in China. So the high-end stuff is hand-built in Japan. It's built up north, actually. It was affected by the disaster, the 311 disaster a few years ago. You bring up a good point. Have you tried silver gold cables? It makes absolutely no sense from engineering standpoint, but I like the way they sound. Yes, I have. I have somewhere. I shall show you. There is a Japanese brand. I just got some to play with, but they come in a variety of calls. It's called Augline, AUG as in gold, the AUG. It's just there's nothing to see there. This is not the plugs. The plugs I put on myself, and I just quickly braided up this adapter with some spare I had when I was playing with it. Yeah, from it, it's like having. Well, I mean, yeah, cables. Here we go. They can sound slightly warm. There was another brand, Mundorf, German brand. I didn't like the sound, what the result of that silver gold sounded like, but it does tend to, I suppose, make it sound a bit kind of warmer. And yeah, cables are another quagmire. This is a larger gauge. This is 24 AWG from memory and solid core. That was all right. I mean, if you match up your system well, and I have different interconnect cables, and they can make a tiny difference. Actually, a lot of them I didn't really care about which one pair I used until I got the Utopias, and I found that there was a tiny difference. I mean, it's the same with this, or let's get the stack out. You saw it in one of the videos, I think, the Cascade video, the stack of different cables. They each have a tiny different effect on the sound. But if that tiny bit adds up to something that makes you feel better, then maybe, it makes me feel better versus manufacturer cables like on the HD800. I found there's a significant difference between the different aftermarket brands. Well, if it makes you feel good, why not? What's the difference between the Ether line and Eon line? Ether, Eon. That's 90% of it. There we go. Are you interested in the new Audio-Technica flagship? Yes. I'm going to ask Audio-Technica at the show. What's your favorite headphones and why? Guessing Focal Utopia. Yeah, generally Focal Utopia. Probably actually for bass thump now. For the music that kind of I didn't enjoy so much with the Utopias, probably the Cascades for my fun and entertaining headphones. Now, a thing about favorite headphones is I listened again to a lot of jazz and a lot of like nice stereo recordings. You have to buy headphones according to the music you like. If you like hip hop, then you're not going to ask me for advice with headphones because I don't like hip hop. If you like techno, well, maybe I'd say don't buy most of the headphones I have here. Well, I don't know, maybe Mr. Speakers. But again, you have to think of here's the great advice someone gave is if you're looking for a pair of headphones, find someone who likes the same music you do, who's already been through a lot of headphones and gear, and find out what they use. And that will get you a better idea. So that's why I try and cover a wide variety of stuff. Like I never even thought, it was about a year ago that I could have a playlist with 3 different levels of bass on there to get an impression of headphones. But, it's just amazing. Actually, Val from V-Moda put me onto that idea that music about having a frequency response years and years and years and years ago, 2011 or something. And so I've always thought about it, trying different headphones, especially stuff like the Cascades and having that huge contrast between listening to a track. And it's very rare to find a track with a very large balance of different frequencies. And then hear that track through very different headphones and get their impressions and see how different it is. So go by the music first. So it's what headphones should I get is a stupid question. I listen to this kind of music primarily. What headphones would suit that? Would it also suit this other genre? Would also suit this? But even between genres, I've had kind of club dance music which had not enough bass, wasn't mastered with enough bass, and I've had club dance music which has got tons of bass. So it's so varied, even the amount in music, it's ridiculous. That's why I think everyone's getting back into EQing, and that's going to be one of the things about the Pro Ican. It has a bass booster, which has been very interesting playing with. I guess the cables will be influencing impedance. There's more to it than that. I think it's going back to that discussion of electronics and group delay. I think that there's a lot of other stuff going on, but some of it could be impedance related, but there's heaps of stuff apparently. I don't even want to go there because it's just, first of all, it's beyond me, and second of all, it just annoys. I don't want to annoy people. How would you describe the Hi-Fi Man Edition X V2 relative to other headphones around the same price range? That's interesting. I was just going back through my old review of that, and I thought I should recut it with all the crap removed and upload it again. And then I went back and looked at the viewer stats, and it actually had a lot of people stuck around and watched the whole thing, even though me watching it now, it seems really boring and I waffled like a maniac. I mean, you're watching me waffle like a maniac now. So, I hope you didn't pay more than what did you pay, $1,200 for them? I think they're a good buy. I think that they're starting to get in their kind of ability is starting to be encroached by these kinds of headphones around the $800 mark. But I think they're probably I don't know, I don't have them here, but it'd be interesting to compare now. But I still think they're probably a good buy. I mean, they're a good all-rounder. They power well out of everything. I mean, whether they'd be a better buy than, again, this kind of headphone would be a good question, mainly, I think. But if you wanted a neutral headphone that was a good all-rounder, I thought they were good headphones. What headphone system do you think has the best synergy? Well, that's difficult. There are a lot. I mean, it can be. There are people. I remember there was discussion at one of the meets where people used to bring their rigs to Can Jam, and there was a members room, and this is before, a decade ago, and they try swapping out a single component, and it would wreck the synergy. So, the best synergy, the system I had the best memory of. Yeah, that's hard to say. It's just too much. I could go on for another hour, and it's already reached an hour, and I've got to go in a bit. I lost you all in chat. Where are we? The Focal clears are pretty good for jazz. Not surprised. The Focals can be really good through the mid-range, which is probably why they work really well with instruments. Things like, since we're going to talk about jazz, we may as well talk about vocals. I mean, I had a list of headphones that were great for vocals. Stuff that's good through the mid-range is going to sound great with jazz and instruments and vocals, because you've got the same kind of range that's being used for instruments and voice. Let's have a look. The best headphones I've heard for jazz. Probably Stax. That's probably an easy answer. There's not an easy answer to that. The best vocal headphones I've ever heard were the Stax SR009s. So probably jazz would rate on that too. And now they have a new amp. So, let's see. Now, the thing about H800s is they tend to sound too spacious at times. The instruments can be too far back. So sometimes for jazz you want some more intimacy in the sound. The H800s were best for classical, listening to orchestras, actually, because they give a big sense of space there. How's the build quality and general reliability of Odyssey LCD2 Classic? I don't know. They've changed. When I went to Odyssey, they talked about how they'd made changes to the drivers and what have you. And they obviously service a lot of headphones. The trouble they had was with things like the LCD4, where getting a super thin driver and everything very super precise tended to make them a bit less reliable. I don't know how it is now. I'd have to go and talk to them. Let's see, any last questions and stuff. I'm going to catch up with all your chat. Best headphones you've heard under $1,000 for rock. I should listen to some rock again, and then I could answer your question. Actually, interesting thing was, the Naoto Tsunoda of Sony, where have I got them hiding? He listens to rock. His test is AC/DC. Whenever I hand him some headphones and say, can you listen to these and tell me what you think? First thing he does is put on AC/DC. So, I don't know. Sony's maybe. I mean, I've got to get his approval for a rock listening. So I don't know if that's true. I haven't listened to rock for a while, so maybe I should. So, have you tried the Shangri-La Junior? No, I will on Saturday. Everything's going to be tried on Saturday that I haven't heard. Any opinions on Vioelectric amps? Nope, I never tried them either. I should ask. Last questions, and then I'm going to have to go. No problem thanks for coming to the chat. And while I've run out of questions. Thanks to everyone. First of all, people who offered $1 or $2 or what have you on Patreon to support me. It's been really good. Been extremely helpful. And I've just been thinking together plans for things like microphones, and you probably heard my sound quality. It got a bit better. I've organised things a bit better. I've going to Tokyo show. I've actually found out what's going to happen about that. That is usually, my expenses do get covered for that, for a show report sometimes, so that's usually not a big problem. But I'd like to do in the future, I hope to do some more show stuff and interviews and things like that. And I'm going to work to do that and see if I can interview some people in the industry. And I've already done Jerry Harvey. It'd be interesting to see if I could interview Axel Grell and see if I could interview Nao Tsunoda. That would be really cool too. It'd be interesting questions. So what I might do is not so much now, but what I might do is maybe on my website, find out what questions people would like to ask these people. I might do it on HeadFi. If I interviewed this person, what should I ask them, and get some ideas for questions, because it's easy just to ask about latest products, but some more interesting questions. Sometimes people come out with some amazing questions, and I like to hear what people can come out with. Dan Clark interview. That's true. I did one ages ago when he came up with the ethers. So Dan Clark would be good too. And so I've got to think of some places to find out what people would like to hear about. And so I can't think of any. Who else in the industry turns up who would be very interesting to interview? There's one of the... My brain's just gone completely blank on the manufacturer name of IEMs. It'll come to me in a minute. There's a couple of the Japanese manufacturers speak English, and they be very, very cool to interview, I reckon. I haven't heard any of the Euphonic HPs. Klipsch HP3, not yet. Why can't this manufacturer's name come to mind? I've gone completely blank. It'll come to me. Anyway, Final Audio. That's one of the big ones I want. They're new planers. Final Audio actually interesting to talk about. Their original owner died a few years ago, but before that he was a really, really eccentric guy when it came to sound. You see those really strange shaped IEMs that were very expensive, and they got a bit of a fan club, but they also tended to have a sound that people didn't, people found like, what the hell? They were so way out there. But people who got used to their sound said they found some really amazing magic in them. He obviously had some strange talent, I don't know. Anyway, he died. And then Final kind of shifted back to more kind of normal sounding headphones. But they did come up with some headphones which were really kind of bizarre. And then now their stuff is becoming more normal, and their planers sound really promising, actually. Who made the good cable you have for the adapter? I did. Oh, Augline. This one, Augline. It's Augline. It's a Japanese brand. It's a Japanese silver gold cable, and it comes in different sizes. I was actually just thinking of buying some for DIY stuff. So, actually, the easiest. I don't know if Drew still sells it, but Moon Audio used to sell their, at least their Black Dragon cable, and for DIY. and it has the easiest materials to work with when it comes to soldering and stuff like that. And because it's already, you know, assembled, braided, what have you, you don't have to worry about that kind of thing. And so I was going to try and see if he could... I was actually thinking of see if I could buy a Silver Dragon from him. He used to have it on the website. I don't think he has it anymore. Just buy it from the headphone cable from him for DIY stuff. But it was pretty expensive, like $30 a foot or something like that. It was pretty expensive. Update on Fire X7 Mark II. Well, I've told the story a bazillion times already. So there were two of us in this kind of area who were borrowing stuff for review, and then we'd share it. So what would happen is one of us would get it, review it, send it to the other person who would review it, maybe send it on to a third person. So that worked out really well for a while. And then there was... So I had the X7 Mark II here. I unboxed it. The other person said, "Can I borrow it now to do it?" And I said, "Sure, send it over to them." And then I said, "Well, okay, send it back." And then they sent it back to me. And then what happened is I broke my toe, and I said, "Look, obviously, you know, doing reviews is a huge pain in the butt. Climbing up and down the stairs is close to impossible. And he said, "Well, can you send it back over? I wanted to finish my review." And I said, "Sure, just send it back over when you've finished, and I'll do mine." And so I sent it back over to him, and I kept saying, "Can you send it back?" And he said, "Yeah, I will next weekend." "Or can you send it back?" "Yeah, I will next weekend." He didn't send it back. And eventually I just got pissed off, and I said, "I won't have anything to do with this anymore. If you can't be reliable, I don't want to share stuff anymore." So, you know, I've been slow with stuff, but at least I won't hog stuff and hold on to it. And, you know, be unfair to if there's another reviewer I'm sharing gear with. I'll send it on if I can't do something. So I had that, and before I broke my toe, I was all ready to go ahead and do a review. So that really sucked. I just had bad luck with when I've had FIO stuff here. I don't know why. Some of it's probably my fault, but so that's just not going to happen unless I borrow another one. Is Dan's electrostatic good? Well, I'll find out. But what I've heard so far of it has been very, very good. But, you know... the interesting thing was, you know, when we were at Stax said, this is an interview did at Stax years and years ago, they said it's unlikely anyone would catch up with their 30 years of experience doing electrostats. Well, somebody has. So it's going to make things more interesting. I think having more Stax competitors out there will be interesting. But Stax are interesting. They've got a new younger generation of people in there. One of their older guys are retiring. You know, when I was there for the interview, it was just basically, other than some junior staff, it was three people. There was the president, there was the engineer, and there was the PR guy. And the PR guy is just the most fantastic guy. It's just Mr. Sasaki. He was just excellent guy. He's he's an old guy, but he's just really like friendly and engaging. And the president's really conservative guy, really old school Japanese. And the engineer, well, you know, he's just quiet. But now they've got a whole younger generation of people doing stuff, and they've got Edifier, who owns them, but, you know, and provides a lot of backing. I mean, the Stax SR009s wouldn't have happened without their backing, because it was basically betting the whole company on the product. They had no idea if they succeed or not, and that's how tight it was. There was just everything went into that. And that's why they produced one product at a time. So that it was not like, oh, we're working on multiple things at once. It was like one thing at a time. And only when that thing was finished would they work on something new. So once that was done, they were working on the amp, and years working on this amp. And, you know, that must have been big trouble for them. But now they have, you know, Edifier support. They can make these things, makes it somewhat easier. And now they have a new generation coming in. So it's going to be interesting. Electrostats, obviously, I thought they might die off, but, you know, it's gone the other way. So there's still a lot of interest in there. Yeah, so we're still going. And I've run out of stuff to talk about. Oh, what can I find floating around on my desk that I can talk about while we go on? Something I was thinking of doing is talking about using a Raspberry Pi as a... transport and source, and I have a digital board here, so a DigiPro, so with SPDIF and optical output. I was actually had it all set up, and then I realized the optical cables I had were crap, and it was the Iggy didn't like high res through it, so I've got to get a SysConcepts cable or similar. So this is the one with good clocks on it. So I thought of doing a how-to set up video if anyone was interested. I'm talking about USB. So if no one has any other questions, HE1 thoughts. Step up from the HT600 650. Well, then you go Mr. Speakers, or if you want your bass thump, Campfire Audio Cascades, you know, the stuff in the below $1,000 range. You've got the Odysseys. I've got to try those again. That's a step up. I mean, that's what a lot of people are looking at, because a lot of people have been introduced to them through Massdrop now. Soundaware P1 compared to Master 9. That's a good question, because actually then it's plugged in. This is plugged into the Hugo 2, and that's plugged into the R2 R7. Yeah, that's going to be a tricky one. Did you ever get around to explaining the difference between balanced DAC and multi-bit? Okay. Well, balanced... You mean what do you mean balanced DAC and multi-bit? We're talking about two different things. Multi-bit between a ladder DAC and a Sigma Delta. Yeah, it's the difference between chips and difference between now you're using resistor ladders. Yeah, Sigma Delta or R2R. Yeah, that's kind of a tricky one. Well, now R2R ladder DACs are all big circuit boards full of resistors and FPGAs to compensate for the errors in them. So probably, I think the shotgun summary is people felt that Sigma Delta DACs sounded unnatural, and you know, some DACs compensated that with the analog circuitry sound, you know, being made to sound warmer to try and compensate for that. And I think, as I talked about earlier the resistor ladder DACs tend to have some kind of even order harmonic distortion, like you have with tube amps. So they sound euphoric. But it's complex. You know, some people, this is a standard oversampling DAC. Some people like non-oversampling. They think it sounds more natural. But, you know, is the unnatural aspect coming from the filters? Maybe it is. Maybe the older Sabre DACs, maybe it was the filters. The filters in say, a lot of these DACs are fairly simple. You have the original Berkeley Alpha used an Analog Designs DAC, a standard Sigma Delta one, but all the filtering was done with an FPGA. And so there are a lot of high-end DACs, I think around the $8,000 mark, use that system. They use a standard Sigma Delta DAC, but they do their own filtering. So I don't think it's a simple thing. I mean, there are other ways, you know, you can make a circuit sound like anything you want. But I think, yeah, it's not so simple thing. You have to go kind of product by product. But I think, you know, some manufacturers are thinking outside the box now. Instead of just, you know, using such and such, you know, it's a Sabre-based DAC or it's this and that. They're trying to think a little bit more complex, with more complexity about how the filtering is done. And I think what's obviously spurred them on now the popularity of the Chord products, and you can't see the Hugo 2 sitting back there, that have gone completely the other way. They've made true Sigma Delta, true high process, you know, extreme heavily computed Sigma Delta, and that has produced this, you know, the technically ideal result and audibly ideal result using the actual science instead of trying to compensate for it by, you know, adjusting the circuit one way or trying to do something the other way. And it's kind of, to me, a real big difference to actually use raw computing power to try and get the most accurate result, rather than, and we're not just talking, you know, something that just measures well on the bench kind of thing, like a benchmark DAC or whatever, but something that genuinely sounds great because it's genuinely doing the most accurate job it can of decoding a signal. And I remember Rob Watts just posted an interesting thing. He said that the Bluetooth Dave combo actually fully reproduces a 16-bit audio. I mean, completely, accurately outputs 16-bit audio. But wait a sec, what about 24-bit? No, nothing outputs 24 bits. Nothing. He said the 1 million taps of the Bluetooth Dave, 1 million taps of the Bluetooth with the Dave outputs a genuine, completely reproduced 16-bit signal, as accurately as possible. To do 24-bit, I think he said he'd need something over millions and millions, some huge figure. It was way millions and millions and millions of taps to do it. And it would be incredible. But actually, so I think, to me, a lot of digital technology nowadays is kind of doing the best you can with what you have, and kind of compensating for the flaws with a slightly euphoric sound or something, kind of hiding it. So that's not bad, but it's kind of like when I hear like the DACs I have here, and then I hear the Dave just kind of destroys everything. It makes everything sound like, it's like the first time I heard Stax, it's like normal headphones just sounded ridiculous afterwards. And now headphones have caught up. Now the first time I heard Stax was way before all these really nice headphones, before the HD800s existed. Like normal headphones at the time just sounded ridiculous. Like, why are they even trying? And it's like when you hear the Dave, and I haven't heard the Bluetooth Dave. I'm too scared to listen to that. It was like, why do even normal DACs even try? It's just like a totally different experience. It's just, it doesn't feel like this sounds nice. It just sounds like, it's like, if you've ever been and heard been up close, in a jazz bar when the singer's going, and it's just amazing experience. It's like that. So that's my thought on DACs, is kind of along those lines. So what's the price range where DACs sound different or better? Well, under what circumstances? Again, it's you can have stuff in the same price range which has been made to sound a little bit warmer or a little bit more euphoric. Like this is probably a little bit on the warm side. As I'm talking about compensation with DACs, where's my mojo gone? I've lost my mojo. Ha ha ha, pun intended, not intended. So these are tuned very slightly warm. I have the original Hugo is actually up here. My Hugo, pulled out. I'm not using it in front of the TV at the moment. So you can tune stuff to compensate for the fact that it's not, you've got limitations. There's a limitation in how much you can fit in this kind of box. And nowadays the limitations are there are fewer limitations. So what's in here, is equivalent to maybe $1,000 DAC. 10 years ago or something like that, I don't know. But what you can actually fit in these with the components available is much, much better than what you could get before. So at what point does it sound better? Well, let's see, what am I going to plug into this? Let's plug in, a pair of $4,000 headphones. Well, obviously, if I listen to this combo and then plug these into the Hugo 2, there's going to be a big difference. But if I plug in, say, random, inexpensive, new false IEMs into this, and I plug it into a Hugo 2, am I going to notice a difference? Probably not. Or if I was just listening to the Hugo 2 and the iFi iCan, well, there wasn't so much of a difference, between listening with the iFi iCan and versus, let's say I was using, this is the source, and I've already said in the review, this is the source, and the Hugo 2 is the source to the iFi Pro iCan. Well, I don't notice much difference. But let's say I get at a really high quality 2-channel recording, and then I'm using the Studio 6, well, and the Utopias, yeah, I'm going to notice a difference. So it depends on your setup, and it depends again on the music. I mean, again, most of the music I listen to, probably I just may as well use the LX or these, because it's just not recorded well enough, or so much the mastering is wrecked enough of the music that using Utopias there's no point. So what point does it make a difference? Well, depends. There's not an easy answer to that. A lot of people say DACs sound the same. Well, in a lot of situations they don't sound radically different. DACs don't have, well, no, I don't want to say DACs don't have a sound. They reproduce a signal. How well they reproduce a signal depends on and how well you can get any benefit from a more expensive DAC depends on, again, the setup. So again, Utopias, straight out of a Hugo 2, there's very little that's going to... I can hear the difference very clearly between... as I said, listening to the difference between DACs, I need a really good amp to notice the difference. If I don't, if I jump down a grade, let's say I use a cheap amp. I don't have any cheap amps floating around here at the moment. Of course, I'm not going to notice the difference. So there's not a simple answer. And again, the music. A lot of it's down to the music. I just look at my latest Roon, my latest assembled playlist, and I was going through it and stuff I pulled off streaming radio. A lot of it, it's very clear it's not mastered really, really, really well. And even the stuff that probably was mastered really well is now compressed. So, some of the songs I really, really like are compressed. So there's going to be no benefit to using more expensive headphones, more expensive digital gear, and what have you. There's going to be no benefit. So, my opinion is, it's like I do martial arts. I get the same thing. Oh, martial art XYZ is useless in a fight. What fight? With whom? They don't say anything. Generalizations are bullshit, in my opinion. Unless you get down to specific situations, anyone who speaks I just ignore generalizations. It's just inflammatory bullshit. To me. So, is the Mojo with the Eon closed a great pullable setup? Yes. There's your answer. Do audiophiles get too much into deconstructing DACs? Of course. Get into any hobby. Have you got into fishing? Cars? Oh God, let's talk about increasing power in cars. Have you seen? Yeah, okay. What good amp DAC has good synergy with Clear? I don't have the Clears here. Will you be reviewing the CFI IEMs? Yes, very likely. Would you say Odyssey and Burson has good synergy? I've never had Burson here. Burson was interesting. They dropped their prices, which is really good. They're a bit overpriced before. Long story about that. I never reviewed Burson. Sundara, a worthwhile update from 400 Eyes. I want to check those out. I want to add that to my review of $500 to $1,000 headphones, actually. I use a TIAC. My condolences. Sorry, bad joke. I just never liked anything TIAC digital I ever heard. I don't know why. Have you talked about the new Sennheiser closeback yet? No. I'm gonna ask Axel at the show. You gotta wait. Okay, if he's there. Have you heard any of the sought after Theta DACs? Only briefly at a meet. But the old ladder DACs from a number of manufacturers sounded really nice and euphoric. Okay. Yeah, okay, so you can go online, you can find a lot of these old ladder DACs, Thetas and all that for, $400 or whatever, that kind of price. Buy this instead. just don't bother. That's my simple answer. As I said, I was a person who owned one, but you can't do high res, and they're big, and you don't know if the capacitors are on the verge of death. You don't know if they need mods, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. No, just buy one of these. There's your answer. Much the same result. Mentioned Z7 earlier. Do you still listen to them occasionally? Yeah, when I want some bass thumping, and they're tape modded. They're still got the tape mods in them. And, a lot of music I have is fine out of Z7s, LX, Mr. Speakers. This stuff I usually recently, actually, when I had the Cascade, Cascades are sitting in their box back there at the moment. I'm thinking of taking them to the Headphone Festival for testing stuff, actually. I found I was grabbing the Cascades every time because they're just more entertaining for a lot of the music I was listening to. So, the really good stuff, like when I want to relax and listen to jazz, then I grab the Utopias. Yep. If Chord Dave is 100%, how much is Hugo and Hugo 2? That's kind of... Yeah, that's difficult. I'd have to compare. I didn't have all three here at the same time, so I don't want to give funky numbers. Yeah. No, I don't even want to go there. What are your thoughts about IFI? I wanted to test. Originally, the Black Label was one I wanted to test. So this was actually my first IFI review. So I don't know how the Black Label is. I mean, they're considered a really good bargain. I don't know. Some people have heard them and say they sound really crap. This sounded, it's obviously tuned slightly warm. And yeah, I like it. So far I've been fairly impressed. Interesting thing I didn't mention in the review. So I thought, how am I going to describe comparing these two? And I think if you listen to acoustic music, stereo recordings, I've already gone over this a million times, the Mojo is slightly better. If you like your not acoustic, brain fails. I haven't drunk my coffee. If you like, like techno or anything that's not an acoustic 2-channel recording, kind of more general music, and you might occasionally want to put it, you don't mind adjusting stuff using the 3D or the extra bass. You might want to add a bit of bass here and there. This works really well. So, acoustic music purist, non-purist. Where you hear the depth of the recording. If there's no depth in the recording because it was electronic is the word I was looking for. Electronic music, for example, this is might be potentially better because it's got the bass boost. That's my thought now anyway. So, I'm acoustic. Well, hopefully my voice is acoustic. What's your favorite coffee? I drink Ethiopian mocha, but sweetened. So it's in soy milk. I make coffee funny. I heat up a cup of soy milk or half a cup of soy milk in microwave, and I drip coffee directly into it. Oh, we're dropping out there? Oh, we're good. So, at 9 o'clock, I'm done. I've got to do some stuff. Like, wake up, drink my coffee. Very last questions. Napalm coffee. Never heard of that. Do you think the $1,000 PMPs are justified? What's a PMP? It may be too early in the morning for me to deal with acronyms. How many Diana Krall albums do you own? None. I can't stand Diana Krall. Do you think audiophiles too rarely dismiss new products based on companies' old products? I don't know about audiophiles in particular. I do know, like, if a company gets a bad reputation, that's going to do them in. Like Hi-Fi Man has had a rough time because they had some bad luck or made bad choices with. They've had, if a company has manufacturing issues and they don't respond well to them, they get a bad reputation, and it's very, very hard to shake. So, you see the difference in how customer issues are handled between companies, and which companies have a good reputation. It makes a big difference. Just a note for people who know, if you do post stuff in the chat with F words in there, it doesn't go through. Why is demonstration music audio shows so damn boring? I don't know. I don't go to audio shows except I bring my own music to the Headphone Festival. Audio Valve, yes or no? We get the shotgun, the short answer. If I had a lot of money, I had no idea about audio, I wanted something that would work with headphones in general, and I had a nice digital source of some kind, or a vinyl stage, and, I like the shiny, then this is good. But it's, the enthusiast who's on HeadFi or wherever is going to say, what about, but shit audio stuff, you can do the whole deal for much cheaper, and they're going to go, no. So it's for a particular kind of buyer in Europe who's older, has a lot of money, that just wants something that does going to do a really good job. and they don't mind twiddling all the knobs as necessary, and it can plug in anything. If they suddenly go, oh, I want to try some stacks, they can buy some stacks and plug them in. It's not going to do, it's not going to do as good a job as a full rig or whatever, but it's for that, probably more suited to that kind of person. Thoughts on ZMF Dynamics? I'd like to have thoughts on them. I think I shall have to talk to Zach sometime and ask if it's possible to arrange to be able to have some thoughts on them. But I hear lots of good stuff, so. I came across a brand of amp called Hegel. There was a guy I was talking to who bought one of those. Yeah, they're apparently a well-known brand. I use strictly Head-Fi. Well, that's how... Okay, so the story, if you don't know, is... they're not sitting around here. I had a pair of the original headphones I had, which may be floating a different version of the same brand. I have headphones in so many places here. I have headphones under my desk. I have a row of hooks under my desk full of headphones, so I've run out of space. So I had a pair of headphones. This is a slightly different model, but they don't exist now. They're called, the original brand is called MB Quart. They're called German Maestro now. And way back when I was 1992, I think, I don't have the original receipt, but apparently the store is so old that I bought them from that they still keep their original paper receipts. So I was listening to music in my room on a pair of Paradigm Atom speakers using my father's kind of hand-me-down components. And the problem was my bedroom was in my old house was next to or under, I changed, my parents' bedroom, and my father went to bed at 8 p.m, which is really early. He's a sensible man. He got up very early in the morning and did his work very early in the morning before people like his teenage son could disturb him. And he, of course, didn't like me listening to music in the evening, and I wanted to listen to music. So I said, if you're going to do that, and when he bought some new speakers at one stage, I said, buy me some nice headphones. So he spent, this is in 1990 money, consider you, discounted to 175 Australian dollars, a pair of $200 MB Quarts. And I was happy for about 15 years. 15 years of so I was into Head-Fi before Head-Fi. And so what happened is the good old foam pads eventually died. For nostalgia's sake, I bought this pair from one of the online stores. But anyway, and so what I do is someone said you should go on Head-Fi and look, and so I did. And this was 2007, and so I got into Head-Fi, and I went the electronic stores had wall-to-wall headphones. How do you choose what you should get? I had no idea whatsoever. So I got onto Head-Fi, and that's where things got interesting. And so the original reason for using headphones was because using speakers was inconvenient. And then by that stage I was married, living in an apartment, and if I wanted to stay up later than my wife, if I wanted to listen to music while she was watching TV, I had to use headphones because I still had exactly the same stereo setup I had back when I was a teenager, and same Paradigm Atoms. And so that's how that worked out, and it just continued from there. And you've been got into it too much when the site owner says, do you want to be a moderator? And it's like, oh God, am I a sucker for punishment? Yes, I am. So that's how it started. And now it's kind of like the same person goes, you should try doing YouTube reviews. Okay. Being happy with what you've got. Yeah, well, I didn't know I was missing that they had so little bass. They were so bass light. And I was using them in the back of my computer, plugging into the back of my old Power Mac. Plugging directly into the computer was the old classic, oh no, kind of reaction people would give you if you said you're plugging directly into a computer back on Head-Fi, yeah? So I did that back at the computer for 15 years or so. Etherflows or Edition X, H800s, focal clear for electronic music. I don't have the Edition X here to test. I wouldn't use H800s personally, for electronic music, they sound too spacious. Ether Flows, or Eon Flows, maybe. Ether Flows. It's got enough mid-bass hump to be entertaining, and enough low bass. So, does Hugo 2 Studio 6 Utopia sound significant? Hugo 2 and Utopia. That was a tricky thing. This was a really, really weird discussion. If you haven't been following on the Hugo 2 thread on Headfire, you're going to have missed this. And it came to the Hugo 2 update video I did. Some people were finding that they were plugging in, they tried plugging in their headphones using an adapter to use the RCA sockets of the Hugo 2, and they thought it sounded better. Now, it's possible. There are various possible reasons why I liked listening with the Hugo 2 better. I think that maybe the slight harmonic distortion you get from tubes, even a tube amp that isn't designed to do that, can be nicer and sound a bit wider. But actually, direct from the Hugo 2 has been fine, and it could be something to do with the headphone sockets or the cable or something like that. There are issues that the smaller the headphone plug you get, the more crosstalk you get, which is kind of like when I had Susvirus here and I thought, why do they use 2.5mm sockets? There's some potential issues there. There's just very weird design choices. So I don't know if it was specifically... There's been some weird things going on with that. Now I'm fine using the Hugo 2 directly to the Utopias. So... as long as the music is good quality recording, otherwise I don't like listening to distortion, and so much music nowadays is distorted. So that's going to be it for me. My coffee's gone cold, and I'm going to go down and heat it up again and have coffee. And thanks for hanging out with me for an hour and a half or whatever, or an hour and a quarter. Hour and a half. It's over an hour and a half. RIP coffee. Is this going to get heated up again? How was it that I made my coffee? Heat up I microwave half a cup of soy milk. I used to do it with milk, now I do it with soy milk. In the microwave, and I use a filter, just a filter drip. But I don't put a lot of water in there. I put just enough water in there to cover the coffee so it becomes really strong coffee dripping into it. And I do it till it's about just the right brown strength for me. And so I know by colour how strong I like it. And then I add a bit of sugar. So, but a lot of soy milk here, you can get good soy milk here. You have to find good soy milk to do it, otherwise it tastes horrible. And you can get sweetened soy milk here, which is really nice. Okay, so all right, see you guys. Next coming up, these are the next couple of days. I'm going to take them back to the Tokyo show with me, so I can't miss it. So maybe today if I can, I still have voice left. Anyway. Doesn't soy milk give you breasts? No, I think you're thinking of normal milk. Anyway. Best question of the day. Anyway, see you guys again online in the future.